Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. We are going to be talking all things Russia and Ukraine today because we have a Russian-born strategic military intelligence analyst with us. Her name is Rebekah Koffler, and she is also the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Rebekah, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Pleasure to be here with you, Tudor, and your audience.
Well, it's such an interesting time because I think everybody is sort of wondering what happens in these next 2 months and then what happens when Donald Trump takes over. But as we've seen in just the last few days, we see the Secretary of State of the United States of America coming out and saying, oh, we're giving $725 million in weapons and equipment to Ukraine to continue this fight. You've studied Putin. You know what's going on. Are we looking at this escalating to a nuclear level, or what is your prediction of what we see in the next 2 months and then once Donald Trump takes office?
That's exactly what we're looking at, Tudor. And I predicted it not only back in the intelligence community, having briefed the Obama White House, NATO, EUCOM, STRATCOM, which are the combatant commands that are guarding our nuclear weapons and are responsible for prosecuting a war in Europe. I also predicted this in my book, Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America, which was published in 2021, and an update is coming in March 2025. So Russian warfighting strategy, its centerpiece is nuclear weapons. Why is that? It's because NATO is conventionally superior, and Russia is superior in terms of nuclear realm. And now that President Biden foolishly authorized Zelensky to strike deep into Russia with ATACMS, Putin has retaliated using an ICBM disguised as an IRBM. ICBMs are designed to wage nuclear war, and that missile, the Oreshnik, can do both. In fact, it can fight nuclear war without producing a nuclear mushroom. And that's what we are inching towards right now, with Biden remaining cognitively impaired and his finger being on the nuclear button of U.S. homeland.
So let me ask you, Russia is so powerful. I mean, it's such a large country. Now, I know that they haven't been in the best financial shape, but they are a massive country with a connection to China. How is Ukraine actually holding them off?
It isn't. This is why we are in this third year. It's almost 3 years old, this war. Putin is calibrating his war strategy to make it the war of attrition. What is a war of attrition? It's the relentless elimination of adversarial manpower and weapons arsenal. Right? He doesn't want, ideally, to provoke a retaliation from NATO or the United States because, again, he doesn't want to cause nuclear war or even a kinetic conventional war, but he wants to keep Ukraine away from NATO, which is a red line for Russia, and he stated it multiple times. And that's why Ukraine is basically ceasing to exist, if you will. It's financially 100% dependent on the United States and Europe, and that's why President Biden continues this gravy train, throwing in billions and billions of dollars for the unwinnable war. And Ukraine, its infrastructure is 50% eliminated by the Russians. And so once the infrastructure is eliminated, the power grid is down, especially in winter, the people are going to have a very, very hard time surviving. And that is thanks to the miscalculation of the U.S. and NATO of what is called the combat potential between Russia and Ukraine. That was never winnable for Ukraine.
Let me ask you this. There's two schools of thought, and I want to get your opinion on what you think Putin is trying to do here, because there's the group of people that say, oh, he's just trying to take back the Soviet Union and he wants he wanted Crimea. He wants Ukraine. He wants to rejoin the nations of the Soviet Union and recreate the Soviet Union, and then he'll be satisfied. And there's a group that says he's going to power through Ukraine, go right into Poland, and that's going to be World War III, and that's why the U.S. has to be involved.
Okay, well, the second school of thought is idiotic, and here's why. Putin is not suicidal. He's a rational man. He's not going to invade Poland or Germany or any NATO country. Why is that? It's because there's a thing called Article 5, collective defense. And as I said, Russia is conventionally inferior. Putin fears the deployment of US and NATO troops into the theater in Ukraine. This is why he keeps saying that he's going to have to use nuclear weapons, and he lowered the nuclear threshold by approving an updated nuclear doctrine. And so what he wants is to establish what is called the strategic security perimeter that has eroded with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 from about 1,000 miles to 100 miles. That's a shorter distance than between New York and Washington. Just like we, the United States, have our own of the Monroe Doctrine, the Russians have theirs, on which they have relied for their security on centuries, and Ukraine is part of that, and that's what this war is all about.
So if Russia just wants Ukraine, I mean, obviously that's a significant problem, but if that is the goal here, have we seen the United States get involved in a war like this at this level in the past?
First, the United States has never been in this type of war before because it has never fought with a nuclear power. Nuclear weapons are a completely different animal. There would not be any winners or losers, so to speak. And why is that? And we modeled this back in the intelligence community. I personally led some red teams in these war games. Red team typically means an adversary's military force, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, and blue team is the United States. Every single war, it progressed between Russia and the United States, which, by the way, the Russian General Staff has assessed a few years ago as inevitable, because we are fighting with the Russians over the control of what they consider their Monroe Doctrine. So every war progressed eventually into the nuclear realm. And even if you fire a tactical nuclear warhead, which is sub-kiloton, low yield, low fallout, it eventually progresses into a large-scale nuclear war because the United States does not have currently tactical nuclear warheads. For your information, President Trump, during his first term, authorized a U.S. capability similar to what the Russians have for our Navy to develop a nuclear-tipped sea-launched cruise missiles. But President Biden nixed that program. So this is why this war is inevitable. And this is why my book is called Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America, because such plan does exist. And I described it at the unclassified level. Why does it exist? Not because Russians want to invade the United States and strike us, but they have prepared this plan for the event that the United States uses a third country like Ukraine to defeat Russia. That's why it exists. Why do Europeans not participate? Well, it beats me. It's a mystery to me. And as I said, I personally briefed NATO in 2013 September, just a few months before Putin's invasion of Crimea, and I laid out at the classified level what Putin's plans were, what the warfighting strategy was, and yet nobody wanted to contribute towards their own security and develop a viable deterrent strategy, beef up the force posture. And in fact, very few countries right now in NATO contribute even 2% towards their security because they're used to using us as suckers. Even Germany, the richest country in Europe, still does not pay 2%. So, and why?
It's just interesting. It's not historically what the United States has done. I mean, this is certainly not what the founding fathers wanted. They were saying stay out of foreign wars as much as you can. You are a superpower, or they were planning to become the They knew what they had with the land of the United States of America. They knew that the potential was there. Ultimately, the United States becomes a superpower. I understand peace through strength. This is just now an ongoing war. I see the Democrats continuously every day promoting this ongoing war. It's very suspicious. Now you have, as you mentioned, Joe Biden saying that he's authorizing Ukraine to bomb Russia. That's a whole nother level. Putin had already warned of nuclear war if that were to happen. That was his response to this. Now, after that response of him saying that he will use nuclear weapons that will reach the United States, we have the Secretary of State announcing that they're sending more weapons and more equipment to Ukraine. I haven't read exactly what that equipment and what those weapons are. What is happening here between Biden and Trump? Because you've said that Putin has tricked 4 presidents. Trump is not one of them. Is Biden being manipulated right now, or is he doing this in order to set Trump up for failure and nuclear war?
It's a mystery to me, Tudor. I'm actually very good at getting inside Putin's mindset, on which I spent my intelligence career. I have no idea how Biden's brain works and whether it works
He
at
actually
all.
might not know that right this moment either.
It doesn't. So I have 2 hypotheses. Well, let's just say it's one primary hypothesis, that the real person who is pulling the strings here is someone like President Obama and his circle. Because look at it this way, the majority of Biden's circle are the Obama people that have the same ideology, and that is to continue what they view as democratizing Ukraine. And Ukraine has nothing in its history, just like Russia, pointing to the fact that it could ever become a democracy. In fact, Zelensky is a miniature Putin. He's not a democratic leader, and we can talk about it forever. He outlawed all opposition. So,
well,
my
yeah, he doesn't, now that he's in a wartime president, he never has to have another election. I mean, that's pretty suspicious. The guy is coming over in sweatpants and a sweatshirt and addressing the UN and everybody else. I mean, there's something, nobody feels good about that. And yet there seemed to be this faction of the country that are completely brainwashed into believing that this guy is some global hero, which I don't see him as a global hero at all. You talk about Obama. Get into that, because you say he was tricked by Putin. And I want to know exactly what you mean by that, because if he truly is pulling the strings, and I believe he is in much of the Democrat Party, how much danger are we in, and how could he be so naive?
So basically, what happened during the Obama presidency in the beginning, and that's when I briefed his White House at highly classified level on Putin's plans, they didn't want to hear that. At the Pentagon, the response was, why do you keep telling us about a war with Russia? We're not planning on going to war with Russia. And my response was, well, the Russians believe that we will be at war, might want to listen, because the Russians saw that we keep, expanding NATO. Well, Obama wanted to have peace with Putin, and Putin is a former KGB officer. He basically prides himself on being a human relations specialist, and I quote, and he buttered up, Obama. He was basically manipulating them to the point where in 2013, when Syria's Assad used chemical weapons against his own people, Obama and his Secretary of State, John Kerry, decided, let's just let the Russians eliminate or take out those weapons. And this was almost laughable. And we couldn't believe in the intelligence community that Obama and his advisors could be so stupid as to believe that Putin would actually do that, because Russia and Syria are allies. And so this level of incompetence exists in the U.S. national security apparatus. And so it's very dangerous right now during this period where President Trump is still not president, and President Biden is basically messing up Trump's peace plan by continuing to escalate and to basically continue flowing billions of dollars of weaponry into Ukraine. But my suspicion is there's also huge monetary entanglements between the military-industrial complex and the Biden administration and Ukraine, because why else would they never have enough money for our own people, Americans who experience hurricanes and other hardships, but there's always somehow money for someone else, such as Ukraine, billions and billions of them.
Oh, you can't possibly mean that maybe people in the administration are making money off of us staying at war.
Well, watch where people go. Once Biden is out, right? Watch where all of his advisors go, what kind of jobs they take. And I guarantee you it's going to be the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummons, and the Raytheons of the U.S. Look at where Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin comes from. And he personally, he said that the goal of U.S. involvement in what technically is a Russia-Ukraine, a local war, is to deplete Russians' weapons arsenal and to weaken Russia militarily. And at the same time, it's feeding our military-industrial complex. And Secretary Lloyd Austin was on the board. That's where he came from, on the board of a huge military-industrial complex.
I mean, is there the chance that then what you're saying would be that there is the chance that an administration, and I don't believe that Joe Biden is making these decisions, because I don't believe Joe Biden is making any decisions. I don't even believe that Joe Biden pardoned Hunter Biden. I think that Hunter Biden sat down at Thanksgiving dinner and looked at his mother and said, he can't even speak. We've got to do this now before he dies, before the end of his term. So I don't believe Joe Biden is making any decisions right now. But I do believe that there are enough corrupt individuals in government on both sides, but the Biden administration is in office right now, that they would continue to escalate a war for personal profit.
100%. Look, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in Soviet Russia. I came to this country for justice and freedom. And what I found, having served in the US government, that it's worse than the Soviet government and the KGB. Why is that? It's because in Russia, you know exactly what to expect. You know the government is corrupt. You know Putin is an assassin. You know KGB tortures and poisons people. In the US, we have this impression that we have a system of justice. But, it's basically Biden's pardon of Hunter Biden, whoever that's behind all this stuff. It's straight out of the Soviet playbook. The whole dual justice system is straight out of the Soviet playbook. They borrowed it, and it's basically, they're doing the very same thing that the Russian dictatorship, the Chinese dictatorship are doing to keep their power, to keep control of the people.
Let's be honest for a second, too, because Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the entirety of Europe, especially Eastern Europe. And Hunter Biden went there. Like, that's where he learned this stuff. Hunter Biden was a prodigy of the corruption of Ukraine. So we seem to forget that Ukraine was so corrupt. We sent someone there to try to figure out what was going on. We tried to infiltrate and find out how bad it truly was. So Russia is now trying to take back their own. I mean, this was a part of the Soviet Union, as I mentioned. So they learned it from the best. I mean, when you talk about him being a person of human relations or a specialist of human relations, this guy was a trained brainwasher. I mean, he just messes with people's minds. That's what these people do. And Ukraine is just a little Russia. Okay. So now he's trying to bring them back together. Our president's son learned from the worst of the worst. And now suddenly we're sending them billions of dollars to fight the mother of all communist countries and the people who are taught them to brainwash everybody. I mean, what are we thinking?
Exactly, Tudor. And I'll bring one more dimension to this. Our leaders like to lecture countries like Russia and China, positioning themselves and as morally superior, right? But Joe Biden, just a few years ago, asked Zelensky or pressured Zelensky to lower the conscription rate for Ukrainian military to 18. These are kids. I have a 21-year-old boy born in America, and he's a kid to me. Right now, 500,000 of Ukrainian men are either dead or gravely wounded. And the Ukrainian KGB, right, the SBU, Служба безпеки України, is running around grabbing Ukrainian men off the streets to throw them on the battlefield
Of an
into Putin's meat
unwinnable
grinder.
war.
How can we like pretend that we have this moral superiority? I mean, Biden basically has Ukrainians' blood on his hands.
He is sending children into an unwinnable war. So let me ask you this. We talked about the two scenarios. You said that this is to reunite the Soviet Union. What happens then? If he gets that, what happens then? What's his goal, Putin?
So the nuance here, I did not say he wants to physically reunite the Soviet Union. What I said is he wants to reconstitute the strategic security perimeter. And what that means is that they want to have Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia be governed by either neutral governments or pro-Russian, but at minimum not hostile to Russia. And they want neutrality in terms of military blocs. They don't want these countries in NATO, because once NATO admits a country, it deploys its military hardware, such as radar systems, which is part of the missile defense, it deploys forces and things like that. And so then all of a sudden Russia finds a adversarial alliance, which it actually designated as its top security threat right on its doorstep. So that's what Putin doesn't want. Now, if, let's just say, President Trump, for argument's sake, is going to make that peace deal, which now is going to be extremely difficult because Putin does not trust the United States at this point, because Biden just did 180. Biden himself said 2 years ago that he doesn't provide ATACMS to Ukraine because he doesn't want to start a World War III, and now he did. So it's going to be very difficult for Trump. But argument's sake, let's just say Trump does that peace plan. Europeans have to beef up their force posture, because Russia is the kind of country, it is an opportunistic, right? What does it mean? It's because throughout centuries, it relied on the depth to protect Moscow and St. Petersburg, the two seats of the Russian government. And so if Europe is not protected, meaning if they don't beef up their force posture, and NATO is so fractured that Putin decides that Article 5 is not going to be enforced, I do not rule out the possibility that, let's say, 5 or 10 years from today, if NATO is weak, that he would try to take back the Baltics. Okay, so that is the conundrum. You have to be very nuanced in your Russia policy, and I don't have the confidence that the people who are in charge right now have the intellectual firepower and the historic knowledge to deal with somebody as intelligent and sophisticated and brutal as Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, brutal, I think, is the word that people seem to forget about this. I think everybody thinks that this is the modern world where everybody is nice. I mean, you end up with backpackers who go through Afghanistan because they want to prove that everybody's friendly, and they're immediately murdered. This is like, people don't understand that there are brutal dictators out there, and Putin seems to be connecting himself to most of them. I mean, he's become friends with President Xi in China. He is using North Korean missiles. What is the connection between Iran, China, North Korea, and Russia?
Well, the connection is simple, and that is their hatred of the United States and their perception that the U.S. is their top security threat. Since you brought up North Korea, some of the so-called analysts, right, the talking head, are saying that, Putin now has to rely on North Korean weapons and on their soldiers. No, Putin is involving the North Korean soldiers to give them combat experience for the eventuality that there is, in fact, a World War III in which Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are going to be on one front, and we, NATO, are going to be on the other. So the Chinese haven't had combat experience, neither have the North Koreans. Iranians had experience in irregular warfare because they use proxies, but none of them have conventional, traditional warfare experience. And that's what the North Koreans are getting. Putin has plenty of his own forces. He just authorized the enlargement of the Russian armed forces over the limit of the maximum allowable limit of he's now increased it to 2,350,000. Of them, 1.5 million are active duty. For comparison, the United States has about 1.5 million that includes National Reserve. And Putin just authorized a massive increase in the defense budget. So he's getting ready to fight a protracted, very long war, including World War III. And all we have to say is, the Russians don't know how to fight. This military system is not good. That is not good. He's relying on China. You have to actually use your brain and study the problem. You can't just say things, and that's what it seems like all the traditional media channels, unlike your channel and some other, new types of media. All of these people who give you 3 to 5 minutes to explain these extremely complex problems, all they do is buzzwords, right? And
they don't want to know. They also don't want to go against the administration. They don't want to admit that these people, I think that there's been this discussion for many years of globalism, and globalism brings peace because everybody relies on one another. We're all sharing products and we're all sharing trade, and it's wonderful. It's a glorious utopia, and that's just simply not true. And if you speak to military experts, they would tell you every single time, yes, to you that makes sense. When you are dealing with a homicidal dictator who is, as you said, brutal, and then I'm talking about them all together because you're dealing with China, you're dealing with North Korea. I mean, these guys, the Ayatollah, these guys, they're next level. No one in the United States even can comprehend what this is. And they don't care about trade at the end of the day. That's not their concern. They will work with each other and they will take everybody else out. There's just no logic there. I just don't know why the American people don't see this.
And the logic is their logic is to deceive the adversary. They even use trade to embed certain malicious products and capabilities into our capability, including military capabilities. I mean, TikTok and all the components on which we rely, electronics, they are all just rigged with intelligence collection type of capabilities. I personally do not use TikTok. Why was TikTok banned from U.S. government? But unfortunately, in our infinite wisdom, we allow platforms like, let's say, the Russian KGB owned Kaspersky for years. Kaspersky antivirus software was deployed on our federal computer systems. It's not until President Donald Trump came in and said, boot that crap, pardon my French, out. But again, the people who manage us, they're just really low IQ, like President Trump says. I'm sorry to say that. I don't know how else to say it.
No, I agree. I mean, These are things we've heard about for years. We all remember when we said, oh, we can't have Huawei, but we have all these electronics. We have these, our drones that we use at the border, the drones come from China. It's outrageous. It's like, we've got to have people that are serious get in there and say, national security is number one. If you don't have national security, you have nothing. And yet it seems to be lost on so many folks, but I think it's not necessarily lost. I think you're right. I think a lot of it is corruption. And we could talk about it for probably hours more, but I appreciate you so much coming on. Rebekah Koffler, thank you so much.
Of course.
Is there any place people can follow you, or where can they get your book?
My book you can find really anywhere, on Amazon or wherever the books are sold, called Putin's Playbook, the update coming in March. And I am on all social media, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, YouTube, you name it. Rebekah0132 is my handle.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Of course.
And thank you all for listening to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there, or head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.